Hey everybody, Daniel from Spacedock here, back with another Spacedock Planetside Top 5, this time Top 5 Sci-Fi Aircraft. This video is kindly sponsored by NordVPN. Please hang around until the halfway point of this video for a brief comedic sponsored section from them, and without further ado, let's get right into the list. First up in 5th place, it's the Type 26 Covenant Banshee from Halo. This is one of Halo's many classic, memorable designs, mainly just associated with how much fun it ends up being to play in multiplayer and single player throughout the games. My favourite iteration of this, because it has seen many, is the Halo Reach and Halo 4 version. I think they're the same one, where it has no kind of nodules on the end of the wings and is a little bit more sleek than the usual design. I love the laying down cockpit configuration. I know they made a space version of this that you can see in Halo Reach where it's sealed off, so the pilot is not exposed to space, but the fact that they have a more cheaply produced aircraft version for use in planetary invasions makes a lot of sense. This thing is only 6.9 meters long with a wingspan of 7.4 meters and can apparently reach a maximum airspeed of 84 miles per hour using boosted gravity propulsion systems. It's a kind of ground support attack fighter that's meant to be just as useful for attacking UNSC aircraft as it is for attacking infantry on the ground, and to that end it's armed with 2 Class 2 energy guns and 2 Class 2 projectile cannons, which are the same kind of things we see on the shoulder-mounted fuel rod launchers, obviously only crewed by one pilot, and often used in swarms, mostly to accommodate for their inability to achieve a full hover in the same kind of vein as the UNSC Hornet. Overall, just a very sleek and identifiable Covenant design, carries off that wonderful regal purple colour scheme, especially contrasted against the ice blue particle effects from the main weapons. One of the most fun vehicles to use in any of the games, and one of the best looking Covenant designs in the series, I think. Next up, it's the classic Incom T-47, the Snowspeeder from The Empire Strikes Back. I really love the angular shape of this design. This has to be one of the most memorable sci-fi aircraft in the genre, if only because of the incredible sequence it was involved in that is just sort of burned into the memory of science fiction. These things were of course converted cargo speeders, hence the harpoon and tow cable assembly that gets reused against the AT-AT walkers in the Battle of Hoth. But even in spite of the fact that it's an adapted civilian vehicle, this thing has a really fierce look to it with those large laser cannons laid into the frame. I particularly like the oscillating kind of fins on the port and starboard, folding up from the main frame to serve as air brakes. Apparently this can reach 1,100 kilometers per hour after it's been modified by the Alliance, and operates at a maximum altitude of 175 meters. Obviously this is the Incom Corporation, the same folks who brought us the X-Wing in all of its various iterations, as well as the Z-95 and the ARC-170, and it still has that nice Alliance red and grey colour scheme going on. To be perfectly honest, I sometimes wish this wasn't an aircraft so that we could have had it extrapolated into the role that the A-Wing now fills as the Alliance's smaller interceptor craft, because I prefer this design from an aesthetic standpoint to that of the A-Wing. It's just a lot more memorable with that kind of sloped bow. The design looks a lot more distinct and recognizable. The weapons complement of this speeder is essentially just the 2 main laser cannons and the harpoon and tow cable, though we've seen in various sources that the laser cannons are powerful enough to deal with AT-ST walkers and other light vehicles with a few concentrated shots, but obviously not nearly powerful enough to pierce the armor of AT-AT walkers, hence the use of the tow cable. We don't get to see these used too much. They're used again in the Rogue Squadron games in the 3rd one on a different planet, and we have some evidence to suggest that the Alliance continued to use these as a counter to AT-ATs across the Galactic Civil War, but really their moment of triumph was of course the Battle of Hoth, where they really served, as they do in their entire career, as a symbol of the Alliance's resourcefulness, turning what they have into what they need in a way that really symbolizes the plight of the rebellion and the way that faction has always been written from day one. A design almost as iconic as the X-Wing and the TIE Fighter in the vein of the original trilogy, and definitely I think the coolest looking aircraft in Star Wars. In 3rd place, it's the SHIELD QUINJET from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I should note that this is the original SHIELD one from Avengers Assemble and Agents of SHIELD, etc., not the later Avengers one, which I don't like as much. That one's slightly larger, and of course it does make sense because it's built for the extra number of people that it needs to carry, and of course it carries a motorbike and stuff like that. So from a purely design standpoint, the newer Avengers QUINJET is perfectly fine, but I just prefer the simple, versatile design of the SHIELD one. It has this wonderful kind of avian posture to it as it takes off and lands with the kind of angular moving wingtips and the large fan blade engines. The overall design is very slick and well put together. I appreciate how the main chin-mounted minigun is retractable to make sure it has an aerodynamic frame when it's not being used. The fifth engine that gives the Quinjet its name is surprisingly rarely seen. I believe the 10th episode of the second season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. shows some Quinjets with a strip of engines between the two main aft engines, which brings the total up to 5, as in Quinjet. I don't know if this is something that's only used at like supersonic velocities or during intercontinental travel, but most of the time in normal maneuvers in the films and such, we don't see this strip engine switched on. Unfortunately, there are very few technical details on this. The MCU doesn't really go too far into the whole dimensions and specifications area, but luckily there is loads of footage of this doing cool stuff in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., a show that I really enjoy. I particularly like seeing these in formation on the wing of SHIELD 616 and various other larger SHIELD aircraft. They're also equipped with the same kind of retroreflective panel technology that the SHIELD cargo planes and the SHIELD helicarrier have, which of course allows them to be used for stealth drop-offs and infiltration and such. All fits SHIELD's MO perfectly, and we've seen a few times in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that they can serve very well in the role of attack fighters, in spite of them being larger kind of troop transport aircraft. They're equipped with air-to-air missiles, and they're clearly quite capable of handling themselves in a dogfight. This is one of the unique aircraft that S.H.I.E.L.D. have. A lot of the S.H.I.E.L.D. aircraft are things that exist in real life, like Harrier jump jets and F-35 superiority fighters, but across the deck of the SHIELD helicarrier, this is one of the ones that stands out as a unique science fiction design, and it doesn't really seem out of place compared to those real life things. It seems like a logical extrapolation of a futuristic VTOL aircraft. It's very well put together, and I think the people who designed it were well aware of its unique and eye-catching aesthetic because they reused it many times and put it into lots of interesting situations. I'm sure everyone will appreciate the fantastic sequence from The Winter Soldier where Captain America has to disable a Quinjet to escape the Triskelion and bounces his shield between the engines to blow the fuel tanks out. Again, just a really innovative and interesting use of this really classic design. I hope the new Avengers 1 doesn't completely dominate going forwards and we get a few more looks at the SHIELD version of this aircraft in future MCU movies. In the fall of the 12 colonies, over 50 billion colonial lives were lost as a direct result of inadequate cybersecurity technology. Statistics proved that 75% of colonial citizens did not use VPN software while browsing on public wireless networks like those at libraries and fast food restaurants. This negligence allowed agents of the Cylon Empire to harass and abuse members of the public in a variety of malicious ways, such as accessing their social media profiles, infiltrating their financial accounts, or pulverizing them with orbit-grade nuclear weapons. Please don't let the tragedies of the Second Cylon War happen again. Install NordVPN on your Battlestar today and ensure that you and your crew are protected from the machinations of the Cylons. NordVPN allows you to reliably encrypt your data transfers, conceal your IP address, and hide your location from Cylon DRADUS arrays. Sign on to NordVPN's 3-year subscription plan for maximum value and get an additional month free by using the link beneath this broadcast. Remember, the Cylons have a plan. You should too. Disclaimer, VPN software may not provide reliable protection against nuclear weapons, grievous robotic mutilation, Cylon hybridization, the wrath of God, or ethereal Jimi Hendrix music. Terms and conditions apply. Tillium sold separately. In second place, rather appropriately, it's Thunderbird 2, everyone's favourite Thunderbird because it's the only one that actually rescues people. Long after Scott Tracy has arrived at 1 billion miles an hour so that he can set up his picnic table and tell the people in the burning building that the rescue equipment will be here in 4 hours, Thunderbird 2 finally shows up and actually gets things done. Its design has absolutely stood the test of time. It's just a sort of extrapolated sci-fi cargo plane with inverted wings built around the kind of detachable pod section in the centre, used to house the various modular pods that Thunderbird 2 carries, each of which is equipped with 1 or 2 of International Rescue's pod vehicles, whether it be the Mole drilling machine or of course Thunderbird 4, the rescue submarine. Thunderbird 2 is about 70 metres long and can reach a speed of 5,000 miles per hour whilst carrying 100 tons of payload. It's powered by an atomic fusion reactor, much like most of the vehicles in Thunderbirds, and though it normally carries a co-pilot and crew for the pod vehicles, it can be operated in full by 1 person under most circumstances. Thunderbird 2 is of course stored behind the cliff face of Tracy Tracy Island's runway and accessed via a comically impractical upside-down sliding tube loading mechanism that deploys Virgil Tracy into the cockpit whenever it needs to be scrambled. It is no coincidence that this is almost universally accepted as people's favourite Thunderbird craft. Everything about its design is elegant and yet blunt and simple in such a way as to tell you that this is the one that gets things done. It's involved in some of the most impressive sequences in the show, and is, I believe, the most commonly used vehicle in the entire series, being prominently featured in almost every episode. Thunderbird 2 also had some of the most memorable moments of the entire series built around it. The first one that springs to mind, really, is the episode where it was mistakenly shot down by the US Navy. One of the most intense sequences I've ever seen. I can't believe that this was in what was considered a children's show at the time, because that is some intense stuff. The music is brilliant. If you've not seen Thunderbirds or just not seen that particular sequence, I'd recommend checking it out, because it really is some fantastic stuff. And of course, Thunderbird 2 continues to take center stage in the fantastic new version of Thunderbirds Are Go, the CGI model hybrid show that started in 2015. The ported design for that has very few changes from the original and still looks perfectly sleek and just as iconic as its original forebear. Truly one of the classic science fiction aircraft designs. And finally, in first place, we're back to the Marvel Cinematic Universe for the SHIELD Helicarrier. Who doesn't love a flying aircraft carrier? It makes absolutely no sense. It would level everything it flew over, killing hundreds of thousands of people in a giant artificial cyclone wherever it went. It makes almost no sense as a strategic platform. What's wrong with putting your aircraft on a boat or in an airfield? Almost every aircraft in this world is already capable of traversing the globe without a carrier, and yet in spite of all this, it is still something that makes the inner 12-year-old in everybody incredibly excited at how purely awesome this thing is. It's a flying aircraft carrier. It does not get any cooler than that. I love the diagonal asymmetrical runways on 2 different levels and the off-center command towers. I love the fact that it can retract all of its fans and pretend to be a normal aircraft carrier. It's got the stealth paneling and the large kind of Star Destroyer style engines on the lower aft. This really is just one of the coolest looking things in the last 20 years of sci-fi. I should say that I prefer the fan-powered original Avengers Assemble version rather than the fusion jet powered Insight versions from the Winter Soldier, although I think that's kind of how we're supposed to feel. The original one is supposed to look like a kind of reliable homely setting, and the second one is supposed to look like a kind of scary corrupted Hydra thing covered in guns and red decals and such. I can't tell you any of the dimensions or information about this thing because there just isn't any. They've never released any specifications for anything here. I can tell you that I was incredibly excited when this thing had its Galactica moment in Age of Ultron, where it just came back out of mothballs to save the day. That was even tied into and set up in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which was very exciting. And I'm kind of slightly irritated that that setup was for an element of Age of Ultron rather than for an element of the show itself, because I would have loved to see Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. switch its primary setting to a helicarrier. I mean, the bus was great, but having a cast of characters operating a helicarrier on a weekly TV show would be an incredibly cool premise. I really hope we haven't seen the last of helicarriers in general in the MCU now that S.H.I.E.L.D. is kind of long gone in the main area. Either way, it was great that it got its moment of glory in Age of Ultron, and there are so many gorgeous shots of it in Avengers Assemble as well. This is the kind of thing you can only get away with in full-on comic book storytelling. It's just childish in all the best ways and just an incredibly exciting and imaginative piece of sci-fi engineering. So without a doubt, the SHIELD Helicarrier is absolutely my favorite aircraft in science fiction. Thank you all for listening. This is Daniel from Spacedock, signing off. Thank you for watching Spacedock. If you're interested in supporting the channel, please do check out the links on the screen right now or in the description below for our Patreon and channel membership services. Anything you can pledge goes towards improving our team and our equipment and allowing us to put together bigger and more exciting video projects for you guys on the channel.